Hi.
They say secrets always find a way of coming to light, no matter how deeply they're buried. My life, which I thought was solid as bedrock, began to crack the day I decided to take a DNA test. It started as a simple curiosity. My wife, Laura, had mentioned in passing that our family tree seemed sparse on my side, and perhaps a genetic test could help fill in the blanks. I'd agreed, imagining it as little more than a way to uncover some interesting heritage trivia. Our twins, Sophie and Noah, were excited about the idea too. At 7 years old, they loved the idea of discovering their ancestral secrets, as Sophie called them. It felt like an innocent family project, a way to bond and laugh over quirky genealogical discoveries. We ordered the kits, spit into the vials, and sent them off. Life moved on, and I forgot about it until the email arrived weeks later, announcing the results were ready. Sitting alone at the computer, I opened the report. The ethnic breakdowns were fascinating at first. My paternal side showed traces of Baltic heritage, a surprise in my otherwise Mediterranean lineage. Laura had joked about me having Viking roots, and it turned out she wasn't far off. But then I scrolled to the section that listed shared matches. That's where everything unraveled. Sophie and Noah weren't there. I refreshed the page, thinking it was a glitch. The results didn't change. According to the DNA test, I shared no biological connection with either of my children. I felt my breath hitch, the air around me turning cold. My mind raced, scrambling for an explanation. Lab error? Sample contamination? Anything but what my gut was starting to suspect. I told Laura about the results that evening. Her reaction was immediate and defensive. She dismissed it as a mistake, urging me not to jump to conclusions. Her insistence was almost convincing, but something about the way she avoided meeting my gaze planted a seed of doubt. I decided to order retests for all of us using a different company. Until the new results came in, I told myself I'd keep calm and focus on the possibility of error. But the seed of suspicion had already begun to grow. The days that followed were heavy with unspoken tension. Laura's behavior became guarded, her usual warmth replaced by a distant nervousness. She found reasons to avoid conversations, retreating into her phone or claiming exhaustion. My mind, meanwhile, began replaying memories of our past, scrutinizing them for anything I might have missed. I remembered a period early in our marriage when things had been strained. Laura had been working long hours at a new job, often attending after-work events and conferences. She'd mentioned a colleague, Mark, a charismatic project manager whose name seemed to come up often in her stories. At the time, I dismissed it as harmless workplace camaraderie. Now, those memories felt tainted, as though they had been warning signs I'd ignored. The retest results arrived 2 weeks later. The outcome was the same. Neither Sophie nor Noah shared my DNA. I kept the information to myself this time, choosing instead to dig deeper into the mystery. If they weren't my children, then whose were they? I began my investigation in secret, combing through old emails, social media posts, and photographs. Laura's interactions with Mark seemed innocuous at first glance, but the frequency of their communication raised red flags. I found pictures of them together at company events, always surrounded by colleagues but standing just a little too close. It wasn't definitive proof, but it stoked the fire of my suspicions. One evening, while Laura was out with friends, I found her old work laptop in the closet. It hadn't been used in years, but when I powered it on, it sprang to life. Browsing through archived messages, I uncovered an email thread between Laura and Mark. The exchanges started professionally but grew increasingly personal over time. One message in particular made my stomach drop. Mark had written about a weekend conference, thanking Laura for making it memorable. Her response had been coy but suggestive. I sat there for what felt like hours, staring at the screen. The pieces were falling into place, but I needed more than circumstantial evidence. If Mark was the biological father of Sophie and Noah, the truth had to be in their DNA as well. I decided to track him down. Finding Mark wasn't difficult. He'd moved to another city and was now married with children of his own. I reached out under the guise of reconnecting as an old acquaintance, arranging a meeting at a neutral location. During our conversation, I brought up the DNA tests, framing it as a curious anecdote. Mark's reaction was measured, but a flicker of discomfort crossed his face when I mentioned Sophie and Noah. After our meeting, I'd managed to swipe a coffee cup he'd used, wrapping it in a napkin and slipping it into my bag. The next day, I sent it to a private lab for testing, providing it alongside samples from Sophie and Noah. The results took a week, each day stretching longer than the last. When they finally arrived, they confirmed what I'd feared. Mark was their biological father. The revelation sent a wave of anger and betrayal crashing over me. Laura had not only lied but built an entire life on the foundation of that lie. My love for Sophie and Noah hadn't diminished. They were still my children in every way that mattered, but the knowledge of their origins cut deeply. I resolved to confront Laura, but as I prepared for that conversation, I discovered something else that changed everything. While combing through more of Laura's old correspondence, I stumbled upon a string of encrypted messages. Decoding them revealed a secret that went far beyond infidelity. This wasn't just a case of an affair. Laura and Mark had been involved in something far darker, something that put our entire family in jeopardy. The truth, I realized, was only beginning to unfold. The air in our house felt heavier after the discovery, like it carried an unspoken weight that none of us acknowledged but all of us felt. Laura, oblivious to the extent of my investigation, acted as though life was moving on as normal. She went about her days with an air of strained cheerfulness, while I observed everything with a growing sense of detachment. I no longer trusted her words or her actions, and every glance between us seemed loaded with unspoken accusations. The night I uncovered Mark's connection to Sophie and Noah, I barely slept. The DNA results were irrefutable, but knowing and confronting are two very different things. What gnawed at me most was the encrypted messages I had found on her old laptop. The contents suggested that whatever Laura and Mark shared had gone far beyond a casual affair. The messages were riddled with implications of financial exchanges and secretive plans, but I needed more clarity. I decided that if I was to face Laura, I needed the entire picture first. Half-truths wouldn't cut it. I had to dig deeper. The next step was to revisit everything from the time when Sophie and Noah were conceived. Laura had always been vague about the timing of her business trips, but now they took on new significance. I started by reaching out to one of her former colleagues, a woman named Diane, under the pretense of reminiscing about old times. Diane, ever the chatterbox, readily shared details about those years, unwittingly painting a clearer picture for me. According to Diane, Laura and Mark had been practically inseparable during their tenure at the company. Their closeness was a topic of office gossip, though Diane insisted it had seemed harmless at the time. She even mentioned a particularly long work retreat that coincided almost perfectly with the time frame of the twins' conception. Piece by piece, the puzzle began to take shape. I combed through hotel records, flight itineraries, and credit card statements from that period, which revealed overlapping patterns between Laura's movements and Mark's. A transaction for a boutique hotel, far from the corporate retreat's official venue, stood out like a beacon. I also noticed discrepancies in our joint finances during that period. Small, unexplained withdrawals that I'd once written off as minor household expenses now seemed to serve another purpose. I cross-referenced these with the encrypted emails, which revealed vague mentions of arrangements and cover costs. It was becoming clear that the twins weren't the only secret Laura had been hiding. The knowledge that Mark was their biological father loomed over every new discovery. I considered confronting him directly but hesitated. His life appeared pristine on the surface, with a picture-perfect family and a lucrative career. Yet something about his rapid rise through the corporate ranks, and the polished image he presented online, felt curated, as though it concealed another truth. I decided to delve into his background, employing the services of a private investigator to uncover what I couldn't. The results were damning. Mark had a history of questionable dealings, from accusations of workplace harassment to under-the-table agreements with vendors. Nothing had ever reached the surface legally, but the whispers were enough to confirm my suspicions. Mark was not just a philanderer. He was a manipulator who thrived in the shadows. Among the findings was a record of frequent payments to a shell company linked to an account in Laura's name. The amounts matched the withdrawals from our joint account during the same period. It was as if they had constructed an intricate web of deceit, one that had financed their affair and whatever arrangements they had made to cover their tracks. Despite the mounting evidence, I struggled to confront Laura. Every time I saw her with Sophie and Noah, I hesitated. Her love for them seemed genuine, and they adored her in return. I knew that whatever I uncovered would upend their lives as much as mine, and I couldn't bear the thought of hurting them. But the betrayal couldn't remain hidden forever. One evening, as Laura slept, I revisited the encrypted emails. With the help of software recommended by the investigator, I managed to decode more of the messages. They revealed chilling details. Mark and Laura's relationship had included more than infidelity. They had orchestrated a plan to use company funds for personal gain. The money trail led to the boutique hotel, lavish gifts, and even a private medical procedure around the time of the twins' birth. I realized with growing dread that their arrangements might have involved ensuring Mark's paternity. Whether by deception or deliberate planning, they had manipulated events to serve their own desires, leaving me none the wiser. It was a Saturday morning when I finally decided to confront Laura. I chose my words carefully, knowing there was no way to cushion the blow. She looked stunned as I laid out the evidence, her face alternating between anger, denial, and finally a hollow resignation. She admitted to the affair but tried to justify it, painting Mark as someone who had been there for her when she felt neglected. Her excuses fell flat against the weight of her betrayal. The hardest part was explaining the situation to Sophie and Noah. I refrained from sharing the sordid details, choosing instead to frame it as an adult issue they didn't need to worry about. Their confused expressions and tearful questions tore at my heart, but I held firm in my resolve to shield them as much as possible. As I navigated the fallout of Laura's confession, the private investigator contacted me with another discovery. It turned out that Mark's clean-cut image wasn't just an illusion. It was actively protected by a series of non-disclosure agreements and silenced accusers. More shocking, however, was evidence that suggested Mark's involvement in larger-scale fraud within the company. Laura, whether willingly or not, had been complicit. The investigator unearthed a document implicating Laura in falsifying reports to cover for missing funds. The discovery reframed everything. This wasn't just about infidelity or secret children. Laura had risked our family's future for a man who had manipulated her into being part of his schemes. Armed with this new information, I decided to confront Mark directly. This time, it wasn't about Sophie and Noah or even Laura. It was about holding him accountable for the destruction he had wrought. I met him in his office, laying out the evidence I'd gathered. His initial arrogance faltered as I presented each piece, culminating in the fraudulent transactions that could ruin his career. Mark's attempts to intimidate me fell flat. I had the upper hand now, and he knew it. I gave him a choice. Step back from our lives entirely and face the legal consequences, or cooperate to ensure Laura was spared from the fallout. He chose self-preservation, as I had expected. Laura and I are no longer together. The betrayal was too great, and the trust irreparably broken. Sophie and Noah remain my children in every way that matters, and I've made it clear to Laura that their well-being is my only priority. As for Mark, his empire of lies is beginning to crumble, and I've ensured that his misdeeds will come to light. The truth, as painful as it was to uncover, has given me clarity. My family may look different now, but it is no longer built on deception. Instead, it stands on a foundation of resilience and an unshakable bond with the two children who will always call me Dad. In the weeks following my confrontation with Mark, the fallout was monumental. The threads of deception Laura and Mark had spun began to unravel, each revelation more damning than the last. What had started as a betrayal of marriage had spiraled into something far more insidious, a criminal web that threatened to engulf not only them but everyone connected to their schemes. I spent my days trying to steady the lives of Sophie and Noah, who sensed the undercurrents of tension despite my best efforts to shield them. At night, however, I was consumed by the labyrinthine puzzle Laura had left behind. I needed to know the full scope of what she had been involved in, not just for my own closure but to protect the family that remained. After severing ties with Laura, I consulted with an attorney to understand the implications of what I had uncovered. The falsified company documents, the shell accounts linked to both Laura and Mark, and the evidence of financial fraud painted a damning picture. My attorney's advice was sobering. If Laura's involvement became public knowledge, she could face criminal charges. Worse, those charges could jeopardize my custody of Sophie and Noah if the courts deemed the home environment unstable. Determined to protect my children, I began negotiating a quiet settlement with Mark. The plan was to ensure Laura's cooperation in unraveling Mark's larger scheme without exposing her to the full brunt of the law. It was a delicate balance, requiring every ounce of patience and diplomacy I could muster. Mark, ever the self-serving operator, agreed to cooperate but not without conditions. He wanted assurances that his family's assets would remain intact and that his wife would not discover his infidelity. The hypocrisy was staggering, but I swallowed my anger. My focus remained solely on securing Sophie and Noah's future. Confronting Laura again was one of the most difficult things I've ever done. Her initial defiance had given way to guilt, and she seemed almost relieved to unburden herself when I laid out the evidence. Over a tense and tear-filled conversation, she admitted to everything. The affair with Mark, her role in the financial scheme, and the deliberate decision to obscure the truth about Sophie and Noah's parentage. What struck me most wasn't the betrayal itself but her reasoning. Laura claimed she had felt trapped in a cycle of mediocrity, yearning for excitement and validation. Mark had offered her both, wrapping his manipulations in the guise of charm and partnership. She insisted that her love for the children was genuine and that she had never intended to hurt me. The words rang hollow, eclipsed by the enormity of her actions. Despite her remorse, Laura's confession confirmed what I had suspected. She had been complicit in more than just infidelity. Her decisions had placed our family's stability and financial security at risk, and I couldn't ignore that. Yet, as much as I wanted to see her held accountable, I also couldn't bring myself to destroy her completely. For better or worse, she was still Sophie and Noah's mother. Mark's cooperation turned out to be a carefully orchestrated half-truth. While he provided just enough information to implicate lower-level collaborators in his schemes, he skillfully avoided incriminating himself. Frustrated by his evasiveness, I dug deeper into his connections. The private investigator I had hired unearthed a network of corrupt dealings spanning years, including embezzlement and fraudulent business practices. Armed with this new evidence, I turned to the company's legal team. The decision to expose Mark came with significant risks, but it was necessary to prevent further damage. In the months that followed, Mark's carefully constructed facade began to crumble. Lawsuits, whistleblowers, and media scrutiny painted him as the architect of a sprawling conspiracy. His reputation and career lay in ruins, a fitting consequence for the harm he had caused. Through it all, Sophie and Noah remained my anchor. Their resilience amazed me, even as they grappled with the changes to our family dynamic. I explained the situation to them in terms they could understand, emphasizing that my love for them was unwavering. They were my children in every way that mattered, and nothing could change that. I worked tirelessly to create a sense of normalcy for them. We moved to a new neighborhood, far from the memories of the past, and started fresh. I threw myself into being the best father I could be, ensuring they felt secure and loved. Gradually, their smiles returned, and our bond grew even stronger. Just as life began to stabilize, another twist emerged, one I hadn't seen coming. The private investigator, in his relentless pursuit of Mark's hidden dealings, uncovered a connection that shook me to my core. Among the documents tied to Mark's fraudulent accounts was a series of payments to a fertility clinic. The clinic's records revealed that Laura and Mark had undergone a procedure during the time of the twins' conception. The implications were staggering. It appeared that Sophie and Noah's parentage hadn't been an accident or the result of an affair. They had been deliberately conceived using Mark's genetic material, a decision Laura had knowingly participated in. The discovery reframed everything I thought I knew about the betrayal. It wasn't just infidelity or poor judgment. It was a calculated act that had robbed me of agency in one of the most fundamental aspects of my life. Armed with this new information, I confronted Laura one final time. Her reaction was a mix of shock and shame as I laid out the evidence. She admitted to the procedure but claimed it had been a desperate attempt to salvage our marriage. She insisted that she had believed I would never find out and that her love for the twins was genuine. Her justifications rang hollow. The betrayal wasn't just about the act itself but about the years of lies and manipulation that had followed. I made it clear that while I would always support Sophie and Noah, There was no path forward for us as a couple. Today, my focus remains on Sophie and Noah. They are my world, and I've made peace with the circumstances of their conception. While the pain of Laura's betrayal lingers, it no longer defines me. I've built a new life for myself and the children, one rooted in honesty, love, and resilience. Mark's downfall continues to ripple through his former circles, a testament to the consequences of his actions. Laura, too, has faced her own reckoning, though I've ensured that her relationship with the twins remains intact. Despite everything, they deserve a mother in their lives. The journey has been arduous, but it has also been transformative. I've learned the depths of my own strength and the unbreakable bond one share with my children. No matter what challenges lie ahead, I know we will face them together, as a family rebuilt on truth and trust. The revelation that Sophie and Noah's conception had been deliberately orchestrated by Laura and Mark left me reeling. It was one thing to grapple with betrayal in the context of infidelity. It was another entirely to realize that a fundamental part of my life had been built on a deliberate and calculated lie. The realization added a new dimension to my anger and grief, but it also solidified my resolve. The truth deserved to be known, no matter how deep the shadows stretched. Despite the temptation to let rage dictate my actions, my children remained my priority. They were innocent in all of this, their laughter and joy a reminder of what I was fighting for. With them in mind, I began piecing together the fragments of my life that had been shattered by Laura's decisions. Mark's involvement was clear, but the fertility clinic's role in the deception gnawed at me. How could such a facility, bound by ethical obligations, participate in a scheme so brazen? The documents uncovered by the private investigator hinted at financial incentives, with substantial payments tied to the clinic's compliance. Determined to find answers, I reached out to the clinic, posing as a concerned father seeking information about medical records. The clinic's initial response was predictably evasive, citing patient confidentiality. However, persistence and carefully worded legal threats eventually yielded a breakthrough. A disgruntled former employee, upon learning of my inquiry, contacted me directly. Through a series of covert meetings, I uncovered details that left little doubt. Mark had leveraged his influence and wealth to orchestrate the procedure, bypassing standard protocols with the complicity of a select few within the clinic. The employee provided me with internal emails and payment records, painting a picture of a system corrupted by greed. The knowledge was infuriating but empowering. Armed with this evidence, I could not only hold the clinic accountable, but also ensure that no other families suffered a similar violation of trust. Laura, though regretful, remained an enigma. Her motivations, the yearning for validation, the allure of excitement, seemed almost trivial compared to the enormity of her actions. She had betrayed me, not in a moment of weakness, but through a series of deliberate choices. Yet, despite her failings, she still loved Sophie and Noah in her own way. It was a truth I couldn't ignore, even as I wrestled with the desire to cut her out of our lives entirely. Our conversations during this time were fraught with tension. Laura's attempts to explain herself often devolved into defensiveness, and my own anger made it difficult to hear her out. But as the weeks passed, I began to see glimpses of the woman I had once loved, a woman now racked with guilt and desperation to make amends. One evening, she came to me with an unexpected proposition. She offered to testify against Mark and the clinic, fully cooperating with any legal proceedings to expose their wrongdoing. Her reasoning was twofold: a genuine desire to right her wrongs and a hope that her actions might earn some measure of redemption in my eyes. While her offer didn't erase the pain of her betrayal, it marked a turning point. If Laura was willing to face the consequences of her actions, perhaps there was a path forward, not as a couple, but as co-parents united in their love for Sophie and Noah. Taking on Mark and the clinic required more resources than I could muster alone. With the help of my attorney, I reached out to a whistleblower advocacy group, which took an immediate interest in the case. Their involvement brought media attention, adding pressure on both Mark and the clinic to respond to the allegations. The legal battle that followed was grueling. Mark's lawyers employed every tactic imaginable to discredit the evidence, while the clinic's representatives insisted that any wrongdoing was the result of rogue employees acting without authorization. Laura's testimony proved to be a linchpin, corroborating the documents and emails I had uncovered. Throughout the proceedings, I was struck by the duality of emotions that consumed me. On one hand, the pursuit of justice was empowering, a means of reclaiming control over my life. On the other, the constant rehashing of Laura's betrayal was a painful reminder of what I had lost. As the legal case progressed, I faced another daunting challenge: how to explain the truth to Sophie and Noah. They were growing older, their curiosity about the changes in our family dynamic becoming harder to deflect. I consulted with a child psychologist, who emphasized the importance of honesty tempered with sensitivity. One evening, I sat them down and told them the basics. I explained that their mom and I had made mistakes and that some of those mistakes had led to the current situation. I reassured them that they were deeply loved and that nothing about their origins changed who they were or how much they meant to me. Their reactions were a mix of confusion and sadness, but also resilience. Sophie, ever the inquisitive one, asked if this meant we weren't a real family anymore. Her question broke my heart, but I assured her that families were defined by love, not biology. Noah, quieter but equally perceptive, simply hugged me and said he was glad I was still his dad. Their responses reinforced my determination to protect and nurture the bond we shared. The case against Mark culminated in a series of damning revelations. The financial records, internal emails, and Laura's testimony painted a clear picture of his manipulative and unethical behavior. Faced with mounting evidence, Mark attempted to negotiate a plea deal, offering to expose other corrupt practices within the clinic in exchange for reduced penalties. While his cooperation brought additional wrongdoers to light, it did little to mitigate his culpability. The court handed down a sentence that included significant fines and a prison term, ensuring that he could no longer exploit others for his gain. With the legal battle behind us, life began to settle into a new rhythm. Laura and I established a co-parenting arrangement, prioritizing the well-being of Sophie and Noah above all else. While our relationship remained strained, the shared goal of providing a stable and loving environment for our children kept us united in purpose. I channeled my energy into rebuilding our lives. I changed careers, moving into a field that allowed me more time with the kids. We found a home in a quiet neighborhood, where Sophie and Noah could thrive without the weight of the past looming over them. Slowly but surely, the scars left by Laura's betrayal began to fade. Months after the legal battle ended, I received a letter from the whistleblower advocacy group. Enclosed was a note from the former clinic employee who had come forward with evidence. She thanked me for pursuing the truth, sharing that the case had inspired her to rebuild her own life after years of regret over her role in the clinic's corruption. Her words reminded me that even in the darkest moments, there are opportunities for redemption and growth. They also reaffirmed my belief in the importance of fighting for what is right, no matter how daunting the path may seem. Sophie and Noah remain my greatest joy, their laughter a constant reminder of what truly matters. The road ahead may still hold challenges, but I face it with a renewed sense of purpose and the unshakable bond of a family rebuilt on love and resilience. The dust had begun to settle. Mark was behind bars, the clinic's corruption had been exposed, and Laura and I had carved out a semblance of peace in our co-parenting arrangement. But the scars of betrayal, both physical and emotional, remained. Each day, I wrestled with the weight of the past while striving to ensure it didn't define my children's future. Sophie and Noah, ever resilient, continued to thrive despite the upheaval. Their innocence had been my shield against despair, their laughter a reminder of what was truly important. As I focused on them, I also began to confront the lingering shadows of my own pain. Forgiveness for Laura, for myself, felt distant, but I knew it was a journey I had to undertake for the sake of my family. With the legal battles behind us, life settled into a tentative rhythm. I returned to therapy, not just to cope with the trauma but to better understand how I could move forward. My therapist emphasized the importance of separating the person Laura had become from the choices she had made. It was a distinction I struggled with, but one I knew was vital if we were to maintain a healthy dynamic for the kids. Laura, too, had started her own path toward accountability. She joined a support group for individuals seeking to rebuild their lives after destructive choices. While we didn't discuss her progress in detail, I could see subtle changes in her demeanor. She was more present with Sophie and Noah, more patient and attentive. Though it didn't erase the past, it offered a glimmer of hope that she might one day find redemption in their eyes. As part of our fresh start, I decided to move closer to my parents. The change of scenery was as much for me as it was for Sophie and Noah. The small town where I'd grown up offered a sense of stability and familiarity, a sharp contrast to the chaos of recent years. My parents, overjoyed to have us nearby, became an integral part of our daily lives. The new environment also brought new opportunities. I began volunteering at a local community center, mentoring young people facing challenges similar to those I had encountered. It was fulfilling work, and it reminded me that resilience was a skill that could be taught and nurtured. Sophie and Noah often accompanied me, their presence a reminder of the strength that came from love and support. Laura's relationship with Sophie and Noah remained a work in progress. She had always loved them, but her past actions had created a barrier of mistrust that she now worked tirelessly to dismantle. Over time, her efforts began to bear fruit. The children, ever forgiving, started to see her not just as the mother who had made mistakes but as someone genuinely striving to change. One afternoon, Laura approached me with an unexpected request. She wanted to contribute to the community center's programs, using her experience to help others avoid the pitfalls she had succumbed to. At first, I was skeptical, unsure if her motivations were genuine. But as I watched her engage with the center's participants, it became clear that her intentions were sincere. Her involvement wasn't just about redemption. It was about creating a legacy for Sophie and Noah, a testament to the idea that mistakes, no matter how grave, didn't have to define a person forever. The kids continued to amaze me with their ability to adapt and grow. They excelled in their new school, made friends easily, and embraced the new community with open hearts. Sophie took an interest in art, spending hours drawing and painting scenes inspired by our surroundings. Noah, ever the curious one, joined a local science club and delighted in sharing his experiments with me and his grandparents. One evening, Sophie asked me if I was happy. Her question caught me off guard, but I realized it was a reflection of her growing awareness. I told her the truth. Happiness wasn't a constant, but it was something I was working toward every day. Her thoughtful nod and small smile told me she understood in her own way. Months after we had settled into our new life, I received a letter from the whistleblower advocacy group. The former clinic employee who had first come forward with evidence wanted to meet. Intrigued, I agreed, and we arranged to meet at a cafe in a nearby city. The woman, Clara, was a picture of quiet strength. She spoke candidly about her role in the clinic's corruption and the guilt that had haunted her ever since. She thanked me for pursuing the truth, sharing that the case had inspired her to rebuild her life and advocate for systemic change within the medical industry. Clara's story resonated deeply with me. Her courage in stepping forward had been instrumental in exposing the clinic's wrongdoings, and her determination to make amends was a reminder of the power of accountability. Our conversation ended with a shared commitment to creating a better future for our families and for others who might find themselves entangled in similar webs of deception. As time went on, I found myself thinking less about the pain of the past and more about the possibilities of the future. My relationship with Laura, while irrevocably changed, had evolved into one of mutual respect and shared purpose. We were no longer partners in the traditional sense, but we were united in our love for Sophie and Noah and our commitment to their well-being. Mark's absence was a shadow that faded with time. The legal system had ensured he faced the consequences of his actions, and his name became a distant echo in our lives. What remained was a renewed sense of agency, a belief that even in the face of betrayal, it was possible to reclaim control and chart a new course. Today, our family looks different than it once did, but it is no less whole. Sophie and Noah are thriving, their laughter a constant reminder of what matters most. Laura's journey toward redemption continues, and while forgiveness remains a work in progress, the foundation of trust is being slowly rebuilt. As for me, I have found a sense of peace I once thought impossible. The road to healing has been long and fraught with challenges, but it has also been transformative. I have learned that resilience isn't about erasing the scars of the past. It's about wearing them as a testament to survival and growth. As I watch Sophie and Noah chase fireflies in the fading light of a summer evening, I am reminded of a simple truth. Families are not defined by perfection, but by the love and determination that bind them together. In that moment, I know that we have reclaimed our future, and it is brighter than I ever dared to hope.
How was the video? Don't forget to like and subscribe for more videos. Leave your thoughts in the comment below. Thank you for watching. Bye bye.